September 18, 1944. General stood in his command post near the German border, studying a map that promised something he had almost forgotten: victory. 8 came back. Not because the Panthers fought poorly, not because the crews lacked skill, not because German tactics failed. The Panthers performed exactly as designed: superior armor, devastating firepower, exceptional crews. They dominated every engagement they could see. But seeing was the problem. 58 Panthers deployed. 8 survived 4 days. The reason wasn't on the battlefield. September 18, 1944. Lorraine, France. General George, Third Army had torn through German defenses with methodical brutality. Town after town fell. His tanks were scattered across 180 kilometers of front. Fuel lines stretched across 400 kilometers. Spearheads overextended. The German High Command saw an opportunity. General, 51 years old, was not a fanatic. He was a pragmatist who had fought in Russia and North Africa. He had seen armies collapse. He knew the Wehrmacht was bleeding to death on 2 fronts. But on this September morning, he believed he held a winning hand. Under his command, the 113th Panzer Brigade, not the battered remnants of Normandy divisions held together by prayers. This was New Fire Brigade, fresh formations sent directly from the factories. The tanks were so new that some crews were still learning their turret mechanisms. 58 brand new Panther tanks. The deadliest tanks on the Western Front. His plan was elegant: slice into its exposed right flank, hit the American 4th Armored Division, cut off the spearheads, destroy them in detail, create a crisis that would force the Americans to halt their entire advance. By all conventional military logic, this should have worked. The German tanks were superior. The numbers were concentrated. The element of surprise was absolute. The Americans had no idea a fresh Panzer Brigade was assembling in the forests of Lorraine. Had been allocated 600,000 liters of fuel, enough for 2 days of intensive operations. 2 days. That was all he needed. But was making calculations based on 1940 logic in a 1944 reality. The math he didn't see. Germany could build 385 Panthers per month. America built 2,000 Shermans. Every Panther destroyed was irreplaceable. Every Sherman destroyed was replaced in 48 hours. He assumed tank battles were decided by armor thickness and gun caliber. He didn't know he was leading his brigade into a trap constructed from fog, speed, and industrial mathematics. On paper, the Panther shouldn't just defeat American armor, it should dominate completely. The Panther's 75 Mk 42 L70 gun could penetrate Sherman frontal armor at 2,000 meters. The Sherman's 76 mm gun needed to close to 500 meters for a frontal penetration. In a straight engagement at combat distance, the Panther could kill Shermans before they even had effective firing range. Armor told the same story. The Panther's sloped frontal armor measured 80 millimeters at 55 degrees, effectively 150 millimeters against direct fire. Sherman rounds bounced off harmlessly at anything beyond point-blank range. The Panther could sit at 1,500 meters and methodically destroy Shermans that couldn't scratch its paint. Did the math with cold precision. The Sherman was a reliable workhorse, but it was outclassed. Its 75 mm gun was ineffective against Panther frontal armor. Its protection was inadequate against the Panther's high-velocity cannon. Crew quality amplified this technical superiority. The men assigned to the 113th Panzer Brigade weren't desperate conscripts. These were experienced tankers, many with combat experience from the Eastern Front. They understood tank warfare at its most brutal. 1 Panther should theoretically defeat 3 Shermans in open combat. Some German tankers claimed higher ratios 5-1, even 8-1 under ideal conditions. But ideal conditions require visibility. And on September 19, visibility would be measured in yards, not meters. The Panther's 2,000-meter advantage would evaporate into 30 yards of fog. While deployed his 58 irreplaceable Panthers, American factories were producing 47 Shermans every single day. Germany's entire Panther production for September 1944 would total 385 tanks. The United States produced 2,000 medium tanks that same month, and that number didn't include British, Canadian, or Soviet production. The numerical disparity wasn't just significant, it was crushing. The mathematics of attrition warfare are brutally simple. Germany could afford to lose 12 Panthers per day and maintain force strength. America could lose 150 Shermans per day and still see its armor strength increase. Every German tank destroyed represented irreplaceable capability. The crews might be pulled from burning wrecks and reassigned, but the tank itself was gone forever. Germany's industrial capacity couldn't rebuild what was lost in combat. The strategic reserve wasn't being replenished, it was being consumed. Every American tank destroyed meant a replacement shipped from Detroit within days. Crew losses were filled from training programs that produced thousands of qualified tankers monthly. Supply disruptions that would cripple German operations barely registered in American logistics. This wasn't a fair fight. This was industrial mathematics applied to warfare. Understood this reality when he received his orders. 58 Panthers couldn't stop. They could slow him down, inflict casualties, make him pay for every kilometer, but stop him. The math didn't support that outcome. The question wasn't whether the 58 Panthers would be destroyed. The question was how many days they could delay the inevitable. What didn't anticipate was that the answer would be measured in hours, not days. 7:30 hours, September 19, 1944. The lead elements of the 113th Panzer Brigade began their approach march toward their assembly areas near. Then nature intervened. A thick, heavy fog rolled across the Lorraine fields like a living thing. Visibility dropped to 50 yards, then 30 yards. Tank commanders peered through periscopes into gray nothingness. Drivers could barely see the tank in front of them. Its greatest advantage, the long-range killing power of the Panther's 75mm cannon, instantly evaporated. A 2,000-meter kill shot requires sight. These Panthers couldn't see 50 meters. The fire brigade was blind. 15 kilometers away, Colonel received the first reports from forward observers. Heavy engine noise. Large formations moving west. Didn't have heavy tanks. He had the 37th Tank Battalion commanded by Lieutenant Colonel, a name that would one day adorn America's main battle tank. Didn't panic. He realized instantly that the fog was an equalizer, a catastrophic one for the Germans. If the Panthers couldn't see at 2,000 yards, their superior guns were useless. This was going to be a knife fight in a phone booth. Speed and reaction time were everything. The German column advanced through the mist, tank engines roaring, tracks clanking, commanders hunched in their cupolas. They expected to crush the American picket line and break into the rear. Instead, the lead Panther suddenly erupted in flames. The turret exploded outward, then the second Panther in column, then the third. German crews panicked. Radio discipline collapsed. Tank commanders slewed their turrets left and right, desperately searching for muzzle flashes in the fog. There were none visible. The shots were hitting them from the flanks, punching through the thinner side armor. Rounds that couldn't penetrate the thick glacis plate were tearing through the weaker sides. German voices crackled over the radio, not tactical updates. Panic. Enemy to the left. No enemy right. Where are they shooting from? I can't see anything. Commanders popped their hatches to see through the mist. Machine gun fire cut them down. The remaining crews buttoned up, blind in steel coffins. They had the best tanks, the best training, the best doctrine. None of it mattered when they couldn't see 30 yards. Enter the weapon that would destroy his brigade. To a German tanker, the M18 Hellcat tank destroyer was almost a joke. It had almost no armor. A heavy machine gun could penetrate its thin turret. It had an open top, leaving the crew exposed to shrapnel and grenades. By Wehrmacht standards, which valued protection above all else, it was a suicide machine. But the M18 had one statistic that had completely ignored in his calculations: power-to-weight ratio. The Hellcat weighed only 17 tons. Despite that minimal weight, it was powered by a radial aircraft engine. the same type that powered American fighter planes. This Wright R975 engine produced 350 horsepower. It could achieve road speeds of 55 miles per hour, faster than any tank in the world. No Panther, no Tiger, no Soviet T could match that speed. The Hellcat could relocate from one position to another faster than a medium tank could rotate its turret. In the fog of this speed became the ultimate weapon. The German Panthers advanced in a rigid phalanx, like Roman legionaries in formation. They were designed to advance in coordinated groups, supporting each other's flanks. But coordinated tactics require visibility and communication. The fog destroyed both. The American Hellcats from the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion fought like a pack of wolves. A Hellcat would hear Panthers approaching, race to flank position 55 miles per hour, deploy. Wait. The Panther would roll past, side exposed. 3 rounds penetration fire. The Hellcat would be gone before the German turret completed rotation, relocated 300 yards, next ambush. They didn't fight Panthers, they hunted them. And in fog, the hunter always wins. By noon, the fog began to lift. Receiving reports of stalled attacks and mounting losses, ordered his commanders to push harder. The Americans cannot be everywhere. He was right, they weren't everywhere. They were fast enough to seem everywhere. When the fog lifted on September 19, Piper Cub spotter planes, tiny observation aircraft that looked like overgrown insects, circled overhead above the 113th Brigade positions. The pilots could see the German tank columns below. They called down coordinates. They became the eyes of the American artillery system. For the 113th Panzer Brigade, there was no warning, no ranging shots. 1 second, they were advancing across a muddy field. The next second, the air above them simply disintegrated. Dozens of airburst shells detonated simultaneously at 30 feet altitude. This was time-on-target artillery, a mathematical fire coordination technique where every gun fired at a different moment, but every single shell arrived at the target coordinates at the exact same instant. The effect was apocalyptic. Shrapnel fell like razor-sharp rain. The blast waves were lethal. The elite infantry riding on the tanks were decimated. Dozens died in the initial salvo. Dozens more were wounded. The shrapnel didn't scratch the Panthers' armor, but it stripped the Panthers of something far more valuable, their eyes and ears. External radios were destroyed, radio antennas mangled, telephone lines severed, command and control disintegrated instantly. The German tanks were stripped of their defensive perimeter. They were buttoned up, hatches closed, commanders blind, isolated in explosions. A blind tank without infantry support is a dead tank. Without infantry to protect them from bazooka teams, the Panthers were helpless. Without commanders looking out, they couldn't see the Hellcats flanking them. Without radio contact, they had no situational awareness. This elite brigade wasn't engaged in a battle. It was being processed by a machine. By the afternoon of September 19, the battlefield was littered with burning Panthers. But the most shocking statistic wasn't the tanks destroyed by fire. It was the tanks that simply stopped. September 19, 15:30 hours. A Panther crew sat in their tank 8 kilometers from. The tank was undamaged, no penetrations, no mechanical failure. The gun worked, the engine worked. The fuel gauge read empty. The commander radioed for resupply. The answer came back, no fuel trucks available. The 111th Panzer Brigade, bringing fuel and support, had run out of fuel themselves 15 kilometers away. The crew climbed out. They placed demolition charges on the gun breech. They disabled the engine. They abandoned a perfectly functional Panther tank, one of the 385 Germany could build that month, because they didn't have 200 liters of diesel. 20 kilometers away, an American Sherman threw a track. The crew radioed for recovery. Within 2 hours, a recovery vehicle arrived. Within 4 hours, the Sherman was back in action. Germany had designed the most sophisticated tank in history, precision optics superior to anything the Americans possessed, interleaved road wheels, superior sloped armor, high-velocity cannon. They couldn't produce the liquid fuel to move it 20 kilometers. Meanwhile, was screaming about fuel shortages. The Red Ball Express was stretched thin. American tanks were rationing fuel. But American shortages meant waiting hours. German shortages meant abandoning tanks. American recovery crews towed damaged Shermans back during the battle. Mechanics welded patches over shell holes, replaced engines, straightened gun barrels. Tanks knocked out in the morning returned to the line by evening. Germans had no recovery vehicles, thrown track, abandoned failed transmission, abandoned engine fire, abandoned. No replacement pipeline, no spare parts. No fuel trucks. The 113th Panzer Brigade entered the battle with 58 Panthers. Within 24 hours, 30 lost. Within 48 hours, 50 lost. By September 22, only 8 remained operational. The unit had effectively ceased to exist as a fighting force. American Combat Command A lost 5 Sherman tanks and 3 tank destroyers in the first crucial day. Total losses for the week, approximately 25 tanks and tank destroyers. But critically, American losses were rapidly replaced. Within 3 days, new Shermans arrived from the rear. Within a week, Combat Command A's operational strength was arguably higher than when the battle started. Wasn't defeating with tactics alone. He was defeating him with a supply chain extending across the Atlantic, back through English ports, back through American factories in Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, back to the ore mines of Pennsylvania, back to the oil refineries of Texas. Had built a perfect hammer. But the forge that created hammers was 3,000 miles away, rationed by government. On September 22, issued orders for the 113th Panzer Brigade to disengage and retreat. The great counterattack had failed. The final accounting was brutal. 58 brand new Panther tanks deployed. 8 still operational 4 days later. 86% destroyed. It didn't end in a breakthrough. It ended in abandoned steel. 58 Panthers deployed, 8 survived 4 days. Not because they fought poorly, they didn't. Not because crews panicked, they didn't. Not because tactics failed. They didn't. They were blind in fog, unsupported by infantry, starved of fuel, outmaneuvered by swarms, irreplaceable. The Americans built a factory that moved at 55 miles per hour, a factory with radios, a factory with spare parts and fuel trucks and replacement crews. In September 1944, the factory won. Survived the war. He wrote that American artillery and tank destroyer mobility made Panzer tactics obsolete. Is forgotten. It sits in the shadow of D-Day and the Bulge. But it reveals the truth. Germany lost because systems beat warriors. 58 Panthers deployed. 8 survived. The best tanks Germany could build. Germany's monthly production, gone in 4 days. America's replacement rate, faster than Germany could destroy. Every German loss, permanent. Every American loss, temporary. The Panthers didn't fail. The system failed. Both sides had courage. Both sides had skill. One side had factories that never stopped. The other side had perfect weapons. And no way to replace them. Panthers were weapons. America was a machine. Weapons break. Machines don't.